My pranams to Prabhanandaji Maharaj and my namaskar to all the friends and devotees who have assembled here. Now, the subject before me is Swami Vivekananda's contribution to religion. Now, in today's world, we know very well that religion is a highly misunderstood, highly misinterpreted term. Religion encountered many problems, many challenges in the last century. On both sides of the Iron Curtain, we had to face that religious tradition, had to encounter two great adversaries. One was communism, which was a kind of worship of collective human power on a world scale. And then another adversary was nationalism, which expressed itself in narrow parochial, geographical and nationalistic terms. Religion survived all these challenges in 20th century. In 21st century, it is facing a much more subtle and much more serious challenge, not from outside, but from within. And that challenge becomes much more formidable, much more difficult to confront than the earlier challenges. Because, as I said earlier, the great adversaries which religious tradition had to encounter in 20th century were communism, which is a kind of collective human, the collective worship of brute human power on a world scale. And then Nazism, fascism, and various types of ideologies which were very narrow and very parochial and ultra-nationalistic in their interpretation. But today religion is much more misunderstood because people who profess to be religious, people who claim to be followers of religious traditions, behave in a manner which gives a very bad name not only to religion, even to God. During the Middle Ages, we have to confront many problems. There have been crusades, and there have been 30 years war, 100 years war. There have been any number of bloodshed, battles and warfare in the name of religion and on behalf of God. But they did not challenge the authenticity of the relevance of religion in a way in which it is challenged today. Today, great humanists, very broad-minded people, great scientists are trying to attack religion because religion is being interpreted as anti-humanistic, as a fairy tale, as a fossilized set of dogmas and doctrines which have no place in the 21st century. Now, what is Swamiji's contribution in this context? We know very well that Vivekananda appeared in America in 1893. That period was not a very pleasant period for religious tradition. Religion had already started facing problems from evolutionists after the publication of Darwin's Origin of Species. Traditional theologians and teachers of religious doctrines could not encounter, could not face questions put before them from scientists who said the idea of creating this world within 6 days, the idea of Genesis, the creationist doctrines are not in tune with the latest discoveries of science. Again, the emergence of Karl Marx and Engels, who portray religion as opium, as anti-humanistic, as keeping its eyes closed towards the problems of man in the streets. Religion had no answer. Again, neo-positivists, scientists, who had already drawn inspiration from Darwin and Newton, and also who had developed a kind of hostile feeling towards organized religions, towards dogmatic religions, because organized religions persecuted Copernicus, Galileo, Math, and so many. So the collective confrontation, the collective attack on religion from evolutionists, from neo-positivists, and also from socialist humanists was a terrible challenge to religion. Now Swami Vivekananda interpreted religion as something which goes beyond what we normally understand by that particular term, religion, which generally religion is understood to be a set of dogmas and doctrines. Certain beliefs in a transcendental authority, something transcendental, somebody who creates this world, divides mankind into believers and non-believers, threatening the non-believers with eternal damnation and promising heaven to believers, and who presides over these conflicting groups of believers and non-believers. Now Swamiji said, religion is not a set of dogmas and doctrines and belief systems. Belief systems, dogmas and doctrines do have a place in religion. But true religion goes beyond that. Going beyond transcending dogmas and doctrines is different from different from contradicting dogmas and doctrines. Swami Vivekananda said, religion, true religion, goes beyond dogmas and doctrines. True religion is a matter of our own inner experience. The experience of an immanent reality which resides in all beings, including the non-human segment of creation. And once we realize the presence of this conscious divine principle, which is the indweller, the immanent reality within the whole creation, we also simultaneously realize that it is an omnipresent reality. So as we become spiritually more and more evolved, we also become better human beings. We become more compassionate, we become more broad-minded, and we learn to look beyond the barriers of religious convictions, national and geographical and cultural barriers. In other words, religion interpreted as this inner experience is spirituality. That's what Swami Vivekananda meant when he said religion is a manifestation of divinity already in man. Divinity which doesn't come from outside. Truth is not something that we seek outside. Truth is something that we realize within. So religion is a kind of inward pilgrimage towards our own nature. There is an ancient verse in Rigveda Samhita, which as many of you may know, is the oldest human record of spiritual experience. It is called the hymn of creation, Nasadya Sutta. And there it begins like Nasadasi, Nosadasi, Tadani. In the beginning there was neither existence nor non-existence. This is how it begins. And then there is one portion where the sage asks the question, what is the original source of this world? What is the true meaning of the existence? What is the true meaning of human life? What is the real nature of the absolute reality? Is it somebody sitting above the clouds, a bearded man sitting above the clouds, watching over us with a mighty big stick in his hands, ready to punish and ready to promise? No. With heaven? No. Sato Gandhum Asadi Niravindan Kriti Pradeshya Kavayo Manisha. The translation is this. Sato Bindu means Jagataha Karana, means what is the final cause of the universe? The determining principle behind existence. The sages went in search of this truth. Finally, they could not find it in the external world. Then they turned the inquiry inward. And when they turned this inquiry inward, they found this reality is within their own self. It is Atman, in the Vedic language, in the Sanskrit tradition, it's called Atman or Brahman. Atman as an indweller, the immanent principle. Brahman as the universal principle. So once they realize that this immanent principle is an indweller in all beings, they also realize that it is the all-pervading reality everywhere. This enabled them to sing a great song which comes in the same text, and the song is this: Indram Mitram Varunam Akirahu Atho Divyasa Suparna Virutman Ekam Satviprada Buddha Vadanti Apnim Yamam Matarishwanam. They said, all the names, all the different names and gods and goddesses, Father in heaven, Allah, whoever may be, all the great spiritual personalities, all the great ideals of God, there are different names which enlightened people use to call the same reality. The central theme of this verse is Ekam Sat, which means the reality is one. It can have different names. Destination is one, but there could be different paths, different routes. If you are sincere, if you are earnest, if you are unselfish, if you lead a pure life, then we can reach the destination. We can realize this divine principle within us. And as we realize this truth, we also realize that same reality is the all-pervading reality. So as we become more and more religious in the true sense of the term, that means as we become more and more spiritual, we become more and more humane, more compassionate, more broad-minded. Now, do you think that a Darwin or a Newton, or even I would say a great modern humanist like Christopher Hitchens, great scientists like Richard Dawkins, could question this kind of spiritual tradition? Because it's so humanistic. In fact, if you interpret religion and spirituality, God has a place in His empire even for atheists. Because the existence of God is not dependent upon our recognition. If God is so miserable that He cannot exist without our worship, without our recognition, then I won't have a very high regard for such a God. Such a God is not very different from a very ambitious, dynamic politician who wants that you should vote for him. So, in Vedantic tradition, God has a place in His empire, in His world, in His heart, even for those who deny Him but lead a pure life, who love mankind. So, Swamiji's greatest contribution was that this ancient Vedantic ideal, which was expounded in Vedic literature, in the Upanishads, and which was expounded and developed into a mighty, compact, philosophical, metaphysical edifice by the great Shankaracharya in 8th century. Swamiji gave this to the Western world. It was already there in the ancient books written in Sanskrit language. And the earlier teachers like Shankaracharya, who lived 1100 years before Swamiji, wrote and spoke and interpreted in Sanskrit language, which is not the language of modern times. The language of modern times is English. I am not an Anglophile, but it happens to be the language which is most widely spoken and understood in modern world. And Swamiji used this language. and then style, diction, and certain metaphors and allegories and illustrations which are intelligible for the modern man. So that was his greatest contribution. The ancient wisdom of Vedic and Vedantic tradition was interpreted in the language which a modern man living in the post-industrial era. The age in which the world was slowly becoming one due to the discovery of sea routes, due to the new developments in science and technology. The world was slowly, it had begun to become one in the last decade of 19th century. That was why the organizers of Columbian Exposition could think of organizing a world parliament of religions. It was the first attempt in modern times, in a truly universal sense. And Swamiji used this platform to interpret this universal religion to modern man. There was an attempt, in fact there were 3 attempts to be more precise, to present religion in universal terms during the earlier centuries. Perhaps the first attempt was made in the 3rd century BC, during the period of Ashoka the Great, who was a great emperor of ancient times, who lived in the 3rd century BC, who was a mighty world-conquering emperor, more or less in the lines of Napoleon of those times, of course. And he fought a bloody battle, and seeing the miseries, the agonies of people who were killed and who were wounded, he became a new person. He was completely transformed. He became a Buddhist. He was the first one who thought of evolving a universal religion. The second attempt was made by Akbar the Great, who was the greatest of the Mughal emperors, and he called his religion Din-i-Ilahi in the 16th century. But what he attempted practically did not take off, for the simple reason that he thought if you could borrow different ideas from different existing religions, you can evolve some kind of a universal religion. So it did not work. There was a lot of opposition against it. Another attempt was made by Nobili, he was a Jesuit priest who came to India. But what he did was, he disguised himself as a traditional Indian and started borrowing ideas from all religious traditions. So it did not work out. But Swamiji's concept of universal religion was entirely different. It was not universal in the sense that it had followers in all the continents, in all the countries of the world. Or it was not a digest or a mixture of ideas borrowed from different religious traditions. But Swamiji's universal religion was based on the principle that the essence of all religious traditions is spirituality. That's the essence of the teachings of all religious traditions. Not only of religious traditions which are purely theistic, like Hinduism or Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and so on, but even of religious traditions which are more or less agnostic, like, say, Buddhism, Confucianism, and so on. So, Swamiji said, the essence of universal religion is the essence of the spiritual principle, which is the core of all religious traditions. This was what he gave to modern world. So he said, true religion interpreted as spirituality, as a manifestation of divinity already in man, is not only anti-humanistic, it is the most sublime form of humanism, because it is a kind of spiritual universalism. So universal spiritual ideal, because it doesn't confine itself into humanism limited to one particular religion or the followers of one particular religion. Such a religion will become a caricature. It becomes, as modern interpreters call it, a fairy tale, as a unifying principle. It cannot unify mankind. It becomes divisive. So Swamiji said, true religion is universal because it is spirituality, and once you experience it, once you are convinced of it, it enables you to look upon the entire creation as one spiritual family, which enables you to spiritually cross the boundaries of nationality, geography, culture, and language, and so on. And Swamiji said, this has got a practical aspect. Now, if you just look upon it as universal spiritual humanism, it appears to be somewhat too dry, too much of a philosophical idea. Swamiji said it has a practical dimension. It enables you to look upon the entire humanity as a spiritual family, and not only that, every act of service done to the person living next door to you, to a fellow human being living next door to you, is an act of worship. So worship is not something confined to places of worship, traditional places of worship. You have to remember, Swamiji did not negate any of the practices of organized religion. Whatever may be the type of ritual that we are performing, whatever religious tradition we may belong to, whatever culture we may belong to, all these are relevant, but there is a higher and more universal and more humanistic form of worship, serving the human being living next door to you. Not only human beings, the whole creation. So service of man means woman also. That's a language used in the old British language. Service of fellow human being is the greatest act of worship. Now that enables us to spiritualize our whole life. So spirituality is not confined to formalistic worship of prayer or reading of Holy Scriptures. It goes beyond that. Whole life can become spiritual. Every act can become an act of worship. Every thought can become meditation. Whole world can become temple. Whole life can be spiritualized. The secular merges into spiritual, because whole human existence can be spiritualized. So in this context, he said, I want to take humanity to where neither the Bible nor the Gita nor he gives a list of holy books exist. Means going beyond, not going against, going beyond. Because there is a religion which should be written with capital letter R, which is spirituality, which is beyond religions. The religion of religions is spirituality, the inner core of all religious traditions, which Swamiji said is the manifestation of divinity already in man. Because religion is not conviction, not scriptures, not moving within the four walls of a place of worship, a holy book, certain dogmas and doctrines and rituals, and the priestcraft. It is going beyond these four barriers, these four limiting walls. That's what we normally do. The universal teachings of the great spiritual teachers, who were the original founders, later was completely lost, because human beings have a peculiar habit of defeating the purposes of the original founders of religion. After some time, they will divinize the prophet or the founder, whoever may be, with the Hindu Vedic sage or whoever may be. Now you sit here within these four walls of place of worship. We shall read a book, we shall perform certain rituals, and don't go beyond that. Many of you must have read Fyodor Dostoevsky's Brothers of Karamazov. There is a great character, the Grand Inquisitor. Grand Inquisitor was a cardinal. And there are three characters, Ivan, Dmitri, and Alyosha, Alexei, Pedro, three brothers. So there is a poem, a mystical poem written by Ivan, which he reads out to Elisha, who was a novice, who was a very religious-minded person, younger brother, not direct brother, of course. Now, in that poem, he imagines suddenly Jesus Christ makes his appearance during the period when Spanish Inquisition was in progress. According to one version in 1680, that's what the poet writes. So suddenly the Archbishop heard, the Cardinal, he was a Cardinal, not a bishop. You should not bring him down in the ecclesiastical status. So he suddenly heard a strange man was moving about in the villages, among the crowds, doing miracles. So he got him imprisoned and he has sentenced him to Inquisition, death by burning stake. So at midnight, the cardinal appears in the prison, and the poor man, Jesus Christ, is brought to the front. And now he says, "Why did you come to disturb us? We have no business. We are not with you. We are with him." The Satan tried to tempt you 3 times. When you were performing miracles, turning stones into loaves of bread, Satan said, "You turn all these pieces of pebbles and stones into bread and give to people. They will follow you." You didn't accept his temptation. Then the Satan told him, "You go to the top of the tower and jump. If you are the Son of Man, you can perform a miracle. People believe you." You didn't do that. "And then I shall give you the power of the entire world. I shall make you an emperor. You can use your force, your imperial power, to impose your will on the millions of people." You did not accept it. But we accepted that. We have accepted Caesar's purpose. We are with the Satan. The cardinal tells Jesus, the simplicity. We are with him, we are not with you. And tomorrow we are going to burn you at stake. But ultimately, of course, at the end of the scene, the last scene, he releases him to prison. That's a good story. Now, the point is, this happened to all religious traditions. Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, everybody. Mankind often deviated from the central teachings, spiritual, universal, unifying, harmonizing, synthesizing teachings of the great holy books, the great teachings, original teachings of the original founders of religion. And then what did mankind do? They imprisoned God within the 4 walls of a place of worship, which corresponds to a set of rituals and practices, mechanical practices, a book, priestcraft, and the person who is seeking God. So this happened. Swami Vivekananda said, I want to take mankind beyond the conventional, traditional, mechanical, religious belief systems. Beyond, not against. Beyond. Going beyond means going to the real essence of each of these religious traditions, which is spirituality. Because Swami Vivekananda's greatest contribution, if you ask me, is this. He drew a line of demarcation between conventional received religious traditions and true religion. True religion, according to him, is spirituality, realization of our unity with the entire mankind, the realization of the divine innermost immanent principle within. True, that's the highest humanism. So he said, the infinite oneness of the soul is the eternal sanction of all morality, all ethics, and all good actions. The infinite oneness of the soul is the essence of Advaita Vedanta, which was interpreted by Shankaracharya in the 8th century. Swamiji says, it enables you to look upon entire creation as one spiritual entity. Now, if you ask somebody this question, do you believe in God? If he says, well, I don't believe in God, you cannot threaten him with eternal damnation. So fear of God cannot be an ultimate weapon to impose morality. Morality does have a transcendental source, but that source is the universal spiritual humanism and not a creator God. Creator God does have a place, monotheism does have a place, but true spirituality goes beyond that. That's the idea which Swamiji said. So he drew a clear line of demarcation between conventional religious ideas and spirituality. Spirituality, which means realization of the divine principle within us all, is the essence of religion. That is, spirituality is the essence of religion. This was a unique contribution that he made in the first half of the last decade of 19th century, in 1893. And you can find there's a gradual change among all thinking people, among all educated people, to think in terms of universal ideas. There's a trend to move away from the many towards one, from the divisive towards the unifying, from the gross to subtle, and from conventional, mechanical, religious practice towards universal spiritual idea. There's a trend. In fact, ecumenical council, interreligious dialogues, interfaith dialogues, all these have become very popular these days. To bring under one umbrella, within one platform, all the existing major religions. It's all because of Swami. I would say I'm not becoming parochial. I shall try to substantiate because of Swami Vivekananda's contribution. I should tell you one point. The real purpose behind organizing the Parliament of Religion in 1893 was not to project a universal religious idea, but rather to project Christianity as the most dominant and only religion in the world. In fact, many of the denominations refused to send their representatives. The Anglican Church, I think Archbishop Canterbury had some objection. He wrote it to Dr. Barrows, who was the chief organizer. You can find a letter in the proceedings. He was not very much in favor of inviting the non-Christian, the pagan representatives of different religious traditions in one platform. But there were great men in America at that time. In fact, it was because of their cooperation, their support, that Vivekananda could project this universal spiritual idea before American society. And from that time onwards to this day, there is a trend to interpret religion more or less in universal terms. If you address a big audience in today's world, and if you talk about one religion alone being the only religion, people will listen to you. They won't take you seriously. So there's a trend, consciously or unconsciously, to move away from the limited, narrow-minded interpretation towards a more universal, a more unifying, a more harmonizing, synthesizing, universalizing definition and understanding of religion. More or less, it is due to Vivekananda's influence. Not visibly, but a great spiritual teacher can exert his influence not only directly, but even indirectly. See, look at Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ has led humanity along the path of sacrifice, love and compassion for the last 2000 years. His influence is not confined to Christian community. The great person like Mahatma Gandhi was a great admirer of the spiritual teachings of Jesus Christ. Vivekananda himself had a great admiration for Jesus Christ. So you can see a great spiritual teacher can exert his or her influence in very, very indirect way, and can inspire great ideas, great men all over the world. Now, Another contribution was, it's related to this. Swami Vivekananda's definition of religion could directly influence the way we look at other religious traditions. I'm looking at it from a different angle. Traditionally there have been three approaches in interreligious intercourse, interreligious relations. One approach was exclusivistic, defensive. That's my religion is the only true religion. All other religions are wrong. This approach is not very popular among the educated people of modern world. It has lost its popularity. Nobody is willing to listen to that. The second approach is a kind of syncretistic, which is, well, suppose some Eastern religious traditions, yoga, mysticism, Zen Buddhism, or whatever is coming to America, immediately giving up Christianity or your own religious tradition, completely accepting the whole thing. That is not the right approach. So it's a kind of surrendering attitude, giving up one's own cultural, spiritual, religious background and accepting blindly, imitating blindly an alien tradition. It may be great and grand, but you should not do that by giving up the essence, the spiritual tradition to which you are born. The third approach is dialogical. And Swami Vivekananda's contribution towards the development of this third attitude is very significant in our own times. So according to Swami Vivekananda, all religions are equally valid paths leading to the same goal. If we are sincere, honest, truthful, unselfish, and lead a pure life, then every path becomes an equally valid path leading to spiritual goal. Now, this is the essence of the dialogical approach. You interact with the followers of other religious persuasions, and you accept others' views as relevant and significant from their point of view. Not just tolerate. See, he made a difference between toleration and acceptance. Toleration as an element of complacency, patronizing attitude in it, which is not very different from fundamentalism. You are absolutely wrong, still you can sit here. I give you. Now this is a much more cruel form of persecution. Swamiji was not in favor of that. So he wanted acceptance, not only toleration. Now, interestingly, you find this idea is enshrined in one of the ancient books called Atharva Veda. In one of the Upanishads, it belongs to Atharva Veda tradition in Mandukya Upanishad. And there is a commentary on Mandukya Upanishad written by a 6th century philosopher. His name is Gaudapada. Gaudapada Karika, Mandukya Karika. Karika means a commentary, an interpretation in metrical form, in verses, on a smaller, profound book. And Shankaracharya has written a grand commentary on this. In fact, right now that I am taking those classes in Old Temple in San Francisco, there is a verse there. So Siddhanta Vivasthasu Dvaitino Nischida Dridham Parasparam Viruddhyante Taihi Ayamna Viruddhyate. This is the verse in that commentary. It means people who believe that their own path alone is the right path and the path of others is wrong, fight among themselves. But this non-dualistic philosophy has no quarrel with anyone. Why? Because we accept all of them as our own. And then in the commentary, the great commentator makes a point. You cannot fight with your own hands and legs. If you are angry with your own left hand, you cannot kick your left hand with your right hand. You will hurt yourself. Similarly, we cannot criticize. We cannot blame. we cannot persecute another religious tradition, because all these religious traditions are equally valid paths leading to the same goal. This is the essence of the ideal of acceptance, universal acceptance, Vivekananda stressed and emphasized again and again in his religious discourses, religious lectures. Now, if you look at it from another point of view, you can just have a look at the evolution of religious philosophy in Western world. Before the conversion of Constantine into the end of the 4th century, before Christianity became the national religion of Roman Empire, it had already accepted many of these spiritual teachings. So when Constantine became a Roman emperor, what really happened? Christian tradition itself became a kind of hierarchy. That's the view of Gibbon, the great historian who wrote The Decline and Fall of Roman Empire. And then what happened from the period of Augustine, St. Augustine onwards, there was an attempt to tyrannize, to strangulate independent thought in Western world. Theology practically imprisoned philosophy. Philosophy became a prisoner in the hands of theology. Independent thought was not accepted during the Dark Ages, Middle Ages. Till about 18th century, even early 17th century, there were different philosophical movements to liberate independent thought from the clutches of theology. This happened more or less in India also. In India, you find in the Upanishads and Vedantic Scriptures, there is an attempt to look upon entire creation, whole humanity as one spiritual family. But in the later books, there was an attempt to take a very divisive approach towards religious tradition. Now, you can find these parallel attempts. In 16th century, there was an attempt to liberate independent thought from the clutches of theology. Hume, Locke, all the humanists, British empiricists, they were, of course, in their own way trying to liberate independent thought from the clutches of theology. And in Germany, Kant, and in later centuries, Hegel, German idealism was essentially an attempt to chalk out a new path independent of the clutches, the tyranny of theology. And in 19th century, as I mentioned earlier, this attempt took two different forms. On the part from Darwin, it took a kind of challenge against the teachings of creationism, and from Karl Marx and Engels, it took another form. It began to challenge religion as anti-humanistic. Now, Swami Vivekananda says, religion is not opposed to science. Religion is not opposed to humanism. Religion is as scientific as science itself. And it is much more humanistic than socialist humanism, capitalist humanism, or scientific humanism, or any other types of humanism. Swamiji says, spiritual humanism, which is the essence of Vedanta, which is the essence of spirituality, looks upon entire creation as one spiritual family. So it is the only type of humanistic philosophy which goes beyond the boundaries of ideologies, doctrines, or economic or political thought systems. And in a way, these ideas are already found in the teachings of most of the great spiritual, most of the founders of religion. But in course of time, there was a deviation. And it was Swami Vivekananda who came in modern times, who taught mankind to rediscover and to go back to the original, universal, spiritual teachings of different religions. He never denied, never rejected, never took a negative attitude towards any religious doctrines. He asked Christians to go back to the true original teachings of Jesus. He asked the Buddhists to go back to Buddha, and he asked the Hindus to go back to the Vedas, the original universal scripture of Hindu religious canon. That is a unique contribution Swamiji made. And such a definition of religion, such a concept of religion cannot be questioned, because it is universal, it is humanizing, it is unifying, and in this respect Vivekananda played the role of a bridge between the East and the West. There is a famous ballad in English, it's an English poet, by an English poet, Rudyard Kipling, the ballad of East and West, where he said, the East is East, West is West, and never shall the twain meet. He said, East is East, the Oriental is the Oriental, the Occidental is the Occidental. These can never come together. Swami Vivekananda's historical role was to disprove what Kipling said. Because Kipling was, after all, a master of words. So Vivekananda's words had the foundation of inner spiritual experience. And experience is actually something that goes beyond words. Experience is beyond definition, beyond verbalization, beyond description or explanation. So Vivekananda's greatest contribution was, on the one hand, he gave a universal, spiritual, unifying, harmonizing, synthesizing religious ideal to modern world, which he took from the ancient scriptures of India, the Upanishads and the Vedas, and interpreted in the language of modern man. The other great contribution was that he played the role of a bridge between the East and West, because he was himself singularly, exceptionally equipped, qualified to act as a bridge. He had the best of modern English education available in the later half of 19th century in India. And he was already well versed in the Sanskrit scriptures. And above all that, he had unique privilege of sitting at the feet of his Guru, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who had experienced the essence of the teachings of the Upanishads, the teachings of all religious and spiritual traditions. And so his education and his love for humanity, his compassion for the suffering masses, which was reinforced by what he saw when he walked in India as a wanderer, seeing the misery of the millions, plus his Eastern and Western education, all enabled him, equipped him to act as a bridge between the best of the East and the best of the West, thereby playing a very historical and important role, and which enabled him to interpret religion as a universal, spiritual, unifying philosophy of life. Thank you. Namaskar.